Okay, back to electricity, back to the networks. This is a very, very interesting subject. What happens if we all plug our electric cars in at the same time? Can it cope? What is the international perspective of electric vehicles? So from ESB Networks, their sustainability manager, Senan McGrath. Senan.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've actually moved on from the sustainability job. I'm now the Chief Technology Officer for ESB cars. I've been asked to speak to you about international developments, which is a very broad topic. So I have decided that I would, rather than, I could go and talk about what's going on in probably every European country, but I decided that that would be too detailed given the time. So I thought I'd talk just at a global level and overall, then speak about the European Union, a bit about what's going on in the Republic of Ireland, and then finish by talking about the international efforts that are being made in relation to interoperability, of which we're heavily involved. So electric vehicles, this isn't the first time that electric vehicles have been the promise of a great future. I think it's about the fifth in about 100 years. But what's different this time is, as you have heard before, it's not one or two manufacturers. Every motor manufacturer has a program. Some, and you've heard some of them this morning, some of them because they really, really, really believe it. There's others, and I have spoken with many of them, who probably don't really believe it, but they're afraid the other crowd might be right. So they have a program themselves. It is also a global issue. Almost every significant government in the world has an interest in this. Now, there are nuanced differences in why governments are interested. And if we start, first of all, in the United States, it's probably more on the aspect of fuel security. In the European Union, it's probably more to do with emissions. And in China, it's probably more to do with industrial development. But all of the issues are present in every country. There are probably up to 10 or 12 states in the United States that are just as committed to reducing emissions as any country in Europe. There are many countries in Europe, the UK, Germany, France, who are just as interested in the industrial development aspect of it as the Chinese are. So as I said, my breakdown there is somewhat nuanced, but it's everybody has at the same overall level of, or at least the same topics, the same reasons are there. The level of interest or the level is just sort of maybe slightly different in each country. If I now look at the EU, and just in more detail, and the particular drivers that the energy supply risk in relation to the EU, well, 55% of the EU oil imports are for transport, and 84% of all transport, of all oil that's used for transport is imported. There's a huge impact on the overall EU balance of payments. Oil imports are of the order of about €1 billion a day for the European Union. The emissions, 30% of total EU CO2 emissions in 2009 were from transport. The target reduction that the EU have committed to is a 60% reduction by 2050. There are also a lot of issues in a lot of cities to do with particulate matter and NOx emissions, and somebody referred to that earlier. There's also the Renewable Energy Directive, which that 20% of all energy and 10% of transport energy are to be from renewable sources by 2020. And the EU perceive it that business opportunities are there for first movers. If you want to take this opportunity, you've got to be there first. There's no point in coming 5 or 6 years after the Chinese or the Americans have developed something. So the EU have been studying this whole particular thing of electric vehicles, in particular for the last 3 years. The Transport White Paper was produced in March 2011, and that's the plan out to 2050. Now, these documents I'm referring to, they were all published, they were all up, huge amount of public consultation, a huge amount of, I myself took part in many debates, many consultations, put a lot of feedback into the EU, and a lot of what came out has been modified compared with what was originally proposed. They set up an expert group on alternative fuel infrastructure. They produced their final report in December 2011. They actually produced an interim report about a year earlier. So they've been working on that. And then there's the CARS 21 about the competitiveness of the European auto industry and what the European auto industry needs to do. And it has identified alternative fuels and electric vehicles as one of the key strategies they must follow. So there are just 3 of them. I could have put up a lot more of the studies that have taken place. So this is a European Commission slide that they use themselves. To get a sustainable market, what they're doing, research, technical and demonstration projects, things like the Green Car Initiative, the Green Emotion Project, which I'll mention later, and the High Fleet, which is a hydrogen fuel cell project. They've gone after regulatory measures in relation to CO2 and pollutants, fuel quality, and renewable energy directives, and they've had directives on green procurement. They've also, either themselves or through national governments, tackled the question of market incentives. However, the result of all this work over 3 years is that there's a problem with infrastructure and having common standards for infrastructure. And that's what led on last January, when they had a target date of last May originally, then it was going to be October, then it was December, and then finally it came out in January this year. The draft of the Clean Power for Transport Directive. Now this is a draft directive. It still has to get through the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament. But I can tell you that there's already a date set for when, during the Irish presidency, this is to be discussed. And they also have the follow-up meeting scheduled for during the Lithuanian presidency in the second half of the year, and the target is that this will be law by the end of the year. It will be law probably in some modified form. It won't be exactly as it is now. Usually with European directives, when the Commission come out, it's rarely that the directive is thrown out. Details may be changed, but it happens. So the objective is to provide a framework to support the deployment of alternative fuel infrastructure. It puts a requirement on on all the member states to have a national policy framework. The regulatory framework is they have to outline what's the regulatory framework to support alternative fuel infrastructure, what policy measures have they got to support the implementation of the national policy, and what targets have they got in place for vehicles and for infrastructure. Now, that, just like the Renewable Energy Directive, that will have to be filled out in multiple spreadsheets year by year up to 2020. And then every 2 years, they have to report on that. So that's where we're going with this. Now, in this draft directive, it specifies that there is to be a minimum number of EV charge points put in every member state, because they said they don't want that Germany decides it's electric vehicles, for instance, and France decides it's biofuels, and the UK decides it's hydrogen. They said we must do something across the whole community. So in relation to electric vehicles, they actually have figures for how many electric vehicle charge points must be in every country by 2020. A minimum number. Now, as I said, that's subject to negotiation, and the number itself may change, but the obligation probably won't. And 10% of the charge point figures that they have mentioned must be publicly accessible. All public chargers must be equipped with intelligent metering. That's because particularly the European utilities and the European governments have generally supported the idea that in order not to significantly increase the cost of the electricity industry, smart charging is essential. And the prices charged to use charge points must be reasonable. That's one of the, and you can debate what's reasonable. Just to show you a figure, the minimum number that they've specified, that's public and private, that could include a workplace now, but public and private, 8 million across the EU. Germany, 1.5 million, the UK and Italy, 1.2 million, and in the Republic of Ireland, 22,000 is the figure. As I said, those figures may change, but that will be subject to negotiation. Now, just for information, they also have something in about hydrogen, but it's confined to any member state that already has some sort of hydrogen infrastructure already. Any member state must ensure that they have sufficient number are available, and there's a minimum that they must have one every 300 kilometres. I think hydrogen is at such an early stage they decided not to impose that as a condition on countries that don't have it yet. But I think if this is successful, you'll find as the years roll on in a review of this later on, it will be imposed on other countries. LNG, all maritime and inland ports must have LNG refuelling facilities, and refuelling for heavy goods vehicles every 400 kilometres on the core 10T network routes. Compressed natural gas just says a sufficient number of refuelling stations must be there, minimum one every 150 kilometres. They've also imposed that there's to be common technical specifications for EV charging points, and in relation to the AC, they have decided, obviously, this would find favour in probably in all but one member state, and we'll have to see how that pans out when the Council of Ministers get down to it. But EV charging points, that it's AC type 2 is what they're specifying. They also have specifications for refuelling points for LNG, CNG and hydrogen. Now, just looking quickly at Ireland, the annual imports in Ireland, that's in the Republic, 6 billion, which is about 10% of the total. Now, this is the second point here is a particularly serious one for us, and it would be, I'd say, a similar one in Northern Ireland if you had things separated out as well. That almost 50% of our non-traded sector emissions, that's the emissions that the government have responsibility for, are from agriculture. And that's not going to be reduced in Ireland by 20%. It just won't happen. In fact, it will increase, because the only way you can do it now is to go out early and shoot the cows, or maybe replace them with horses or something. But that we're not going to be able to do that. Transport, which is 30% of the total, and while transport is difficult, the government recognised that transport must actually not alone get its own reduction, but it must get the reduction for agriculture as well. So that's a serious issue for us. Wind generation. In Easter 2010, and the same thing applies north and south because it's the one electricity system. Wind was curtailed off for the first time because it hit 50% of the total generation. And that has been happening at more frequent occasions ever since. And wind generation by 2020 is going to double. So we need some way of using that wind. That's an issue. Now, job opportunities. I just quote here from the Irish government's jobs under the green, delivering our green potential. It's jobs in the green economy that came out in January. They recognise that it is very unlikely that Ireland is ever going to be a car manufacturing industry. However, it recognises that the electric vehicle industry, we have potential, as we do at the moment, in supplying particularly into the UK auto industry, but also that establishing expertise in areas like ICT systems, payment systems, smart energy connection systems and charging infrastructure offers employment opportunities for Irish companies. Now we in the ESB e-cars, we're following a coordinated three-pronged strategy in relation to that. The first is in relation to research, development and demonstration. And this is since the end of 2010. We have been involved in 8 EV projects funded by the European Union with 120 different partners. 15 of them are on the island of Ireland. You can see there that we've brought in 9.1 into the island of Ireland, brought in 9.1 million in funding. Just over half of that has been directly into ourselves. But local authorities have got, was it about 0.5, I think it is. Third level institutions about 1.7 million euro, and SMEs about 2 million. So we're following that strategy of trying to build on the work we're doing in relation to electric vehicles to leverage opportunities for in the research and development area. We also have projects going with large companies, and the project we have going with Intel and SAP, while it's managed from Dublin, a lot of the work on this is actually happening here in the Titanic area in Belfast. But we're working with Renault on a smart charging, where we can take signals either from the electricity system, either from somebody's handheld device as to what their future plans are, from the prices of electricity, and in fact from Renault are the only car company that we have found that is prepared to give us real-time information on the battery state of charge. So we're feeding all that either to a home energy management system, or actually for the trial purposes we're doing it all through the cloud. We have this working at the moment. First of all, it worked in the laboratory. We're now, over the last winter, we've had it working in some limited field trials, and when the Zoe arrives, we intend rolling this out on a much greater, and we're using a smart charger developed by the M2C company. Intel, as part of this, and Intel decided, because of the work they're doing with us on this and the work we're doing with us in relation to smart grids generally, have transferred their world responsibility for everything to do with smart energy to Dublin. Now, they still have units in Oregon and places like that, but they all report into Dublin now. So Dublin is the world headquarters for Intel on that. IBM, we've worked with IBM, and IBM have their first smart city place in Dublin as well. We have developed with them a fully integrated back office system for managing EV charging, and it doesn't matter if it's an electricity system, you're selling electricity, as in our case, or if you have a landlord system or subscription model, the data can be chopped and sliced and diced any way you want. Intel or IBM decided that they would locate this business, their world business, in Dublin for this as a result of the cooperation that we're doing. So that's what we're doing. There are some of the big companies. We're talking with other companies as well, but they're two of the examples we have. But we also have this small business cluster, which we're working with Enterprise Ireland. And just some of the companies like the EVAO that are now producing chargers, the M2C, the charge that I said, and JMC portable charging. I think it's the first portable charger that has been approved worldwide. This all arose because we met with Enterprise Ireland, got a lot of SMEs into a room. We went down and talked to them and said, look, these are gaps in the market as we see them worldwide. And the AA in the UK have that's a portable copy, one you see there on wheels, but they have a fixed one of that in a van that's on trial in the UK. I should say, just bear in mind, nobody gets sort of free orders from us. We buy everything on full public procurement. But people who work with us understand our standards and understand they have to step up to the plate to be able to buy on or be able to sell on the world market. We have at this stage bought chargers. I think I counted it up there, like from something like 17 different companies from 11 different countries around the world. So we have a huge experience at what's good and bad about charger manufacture. We also have done a lot of work, and companies worked for us in terms of development of apps. The Cara company have developed a system for charging in multi-dwelling buildings, and we've also got work going on data logging. You saw so that at this stage 90% of major towns and cities in Ireland are covered, and there's fast chargers in all the interurban routes. The chargers are the same as Irene showed you the specification this morning, so I won't do that. We have at the moment 530 public charge points in. The plan is that at the end of this year there'll certainly be 1,000. 30 fast chargers will be 70 fast chargers by the end of the year. Those their orders are placed for all those. That they're coming in. We don't need to go to any more tenders. That's happening. We have 570 plus home or workplace chargers. How that grows depends on the market development. Just to show you, that's a picture. People down south who are buying cars live everywhere. It's not a city phenomenon. That's just sort of a map of where they're living. Yes, there's more concentration on the East Coast, but then a third of the population live in Dublin anyway. From the surveys we've done, 85% believe in charging at home. 85% of charging is done at home from the work we have found so far, which is in line with what everybody expects anyway. But also on their attitudes, 89% of them believe fast charging is needed, because it's part of the study we gather, have a lot of programs going and gathering data, and hard and soft data. I now want to finish by talking about interoperability. There are two ways of looking at interoperability. The first is, if you're an operator and you want to buy charge points, the last thing I think you need to do is to find that having bought a charge point, you now find, oh, if I buy a charge point from a different manufacturer, it has a different system. They're not compatible with each other. And that's the way life was. So what you want is that you need to be able to buy from different suppliers without any restrictions. You don't want to get locked in to one supplier. Suppliers might like that, but operators shouldn't. So all charge points to the back office systems, they should be able to communicate with a standard communication protocol. We were the first people in the world to actually issue a specification that said, if you want to sell charge points to us, whether you're a small company or a big company, you must be able, your charge point must be able to communicate with a charge point operating system that we're not even going to tell you what it's going to be, because we don't know yet, but it must be capable of communicating, and you must use, and we picked out this open charge point protocol, and we said, you must be capable of communicating with this, and if you can't communicate using this protocol, then we won't buy from you. So that's from the point of view of the operator. Now, as far as we're concerned, that's correct, and it is not universally accepted as the European standard, but more and more it has been accepted. A lot of people are working on it now. We didn't develop it. It was developed in the Netherlands, first of all, but we were the first to actually include it in a formal specification. Now, possibly the more important one is from the customer point of view. The customer wants to be able to use any charge point, irrespective of who owns it. Obviously, you want to have common hardware. The connectors, you don't want them different. But I'm not going to talk about that here today. This can be achieved, as we're doing in Ireland, north and south, by having one operating system. But if you have more than one operator with more than one operating system, and realistically, no matter how we develop our system, it is extremely unlikely that the system we have developed down south is going to be the entire system for Europe. So there will be other systems, and the question is, how do you achieve interoperability with other systems? The key is you must have common data structures for data exchange in the area of the ID and authorization. In relation to the charge point information, if you want the data on your charge point to be able to be used by an app that's developed by somebody in Portugal or Italy or somewhere like that, the data has to be structured in the same way. You have to know, yes, this is what a charge point is. Are we going to say what type of connector is on it? What level of detail do we want? You must get that agreed. And then if you're going to have bill settlement, you must have charging event data. And how do you structure that data? So those three areas are critical. Now, if we look at what's going on, interoperability within countries, where you have one operator, as I said earlier, in Ireland, north and south, from a customer point of view, it doesn't matter. There is no problem with interoperability when you've got one system. In Portugal, they have 3 operators, But by law in Portugal, they must all communicate. They must all use the one system. So you can't have different charge point manufacturers operating different systems. They must communicate, at least they can if they like, but they must send all the data to the common system. So in Portugal, again, there isn't a problem because by law, you have one system. Now, in other countries, Denmark, where Better Place are very strong, although Clever are in there now as well, and in Italy, where Enel are there, they're predominantly one operator. So that operator de facto says this is the standard and we're prepared to cooperate with other people, but they're effectively obliged to use that system. So again, the problem gets solved in a de facto way. Now, where you have multiple operators and multiple systems, and I'm talking now between countries, or sorry, within countries. Germany, you had 6 of the major companies, Siemens, Bosch, RWE, EnBW, the 2 utilities, and Daimler and BMW came together and they said, we need to have a system to have interoperability within Germany. So they set up a project, set up a joint venture, called it the Hubject project, and they set about how can we achieve interoperability within Germany. The Netherlands, multiple operators had the same problem. They said, how are we going to achieve that? The UK has the PIPs. Norway is just on the process of handing out major grants to a whole lot of different operators, and it has stopped it for the moment, or at least not stopped, but it has slowed it down because it wants to deal with this problem of interoperability. And Spain, where you have all the different municipalities, there's a problem. So, in relation to activity, and this is my last slide, in relation to the interoperability activity, DG Move has funded the Green Emotion project, which is the big European project. Has a lot of things, 10 different demonstration regions, gathering data from all those. But the principal thing is achieving interoperability across Europe. And led by IBM as the, IBM and Bosch and SAP as the chief technology people in this, they're developing a marketplace and a clearinghouse system. Now, anything that's done as part of this project has to be freely available. There'll be no proprietary systems developed. Everything will be available on the internet. Everything fully open. It's a condition that the EU have. There are 43 partners in this, and the other 40 of them would insist on it anyway. But you have ourselves from Ireland, Germany, France, Denmark, Sweden, Italy, Spain, and Greece. Not the full countries, but involved in that project. But seeing that if you want to have interoperability between different areas, the solution that's been recommended is this idea of a marketplace and a clearinghouse. There's another project that the Commission, in this case DG Connect, believe is the European answer to interoperability. And it's the Mobile Europe project. We're also in this project. This involves Ireland, the Netherlands, Portugal, and just the Galicia as the part of Spain. The philosophy on this project was somewhat different, in that it believed that bilateral deals, not a clearinghouse, bilateral deals and using mobile phone telephony is the way to achieve this interoperability. Now, the issue we had as in both groups, and we had the same problem when we spoke a number of years ago with Renault and with Nissan, both of whom said, we want data from you for our global data center because we want to feed it into the information in the car. We said, of course we'll give you the information. But it turned out they all wanted the information, the same information, but in different ways. And we said, no, we'll provide the information, but you guys have to agree on having it in one format. We said the same to these two projects. We brought these two projects together and said, whether it's to be a bilateral deal or whether it's bilateral deals and mobile phones or whether it's marketplace, that's the market can decide that. We're not trying to dictate that. But the data structures, the way you share the information must be the same, or else we're all going to waste EU money and a lot of time on ourselves. and that has been agreed. Now, we're involved with, we're on the project for Northern Ireland, so therefore, and our system is therefore tied in with the system for Great Britain and Northern Ireland and ourselves. So if it's to be a system of common whitelists or a pay-as-you-go system, well then we have to tie in with that if we want to achieve the interoperability. So we're keen on being involved in that. The Dutch, I should have put our name down on that too, but it was the Dutch who, it is a thing known as the Vals Treaty. I have, by the way, introduced this to some of the other people in the UK, and places like the East of England has signed up for this as well. This is a political agreement. People from a lot of those other countries that I mentioned there signed up saying, we don't know what the answer is, but we're all going to work together to try to make sure that we come up with a common answer. And because a thing I've been constantly saying across Europe is that if we allow a situation that, particularly if some big countries, and whether that's Germany, France, or the UK as the most likely three big countries, if some of those countries come up with solve a problem on a national basis, people will start developing either at least emotional attachment, if not commercial attachment, to their solution, and we won't get a proper European solution. So that's the treaty. And all of this has resulted in what's now known as the EMI3 group, e-mobility group. We now have all of the above projects. There are some people from GB, so some of the UK PIPs are involved, but not as a group. All of the significant auto OEMs are involved. The Hubject project and some Americans are also in on this project. We believe we have about 70% of the charge points already installed in the world sitting down in this group debating this, and we're hoping that we will do so. And it's open to anybody who wants to join. And that's it. Thank you very much. And that's it. Thank you very much.